2001 A Space Odyssey is a 1968 film produced and directed by Stanley Kubrick, co-written with Arthur Clarke. At the beginning of the time, on primordial Earth, a large monolith with the shape of a perfectly polished parallelepiped and black as graphite appeared to some ape-like ancestor of man, defeated for the possession of a pool of water by a larger and more aggressive herd of their kind. The contact has no visible effect, yet something has happened. The first glimmer of thought has been ignited in the leader of the group, who discover in a sturdy bone the tool and at the same time the weapon that will enable him to dominate the world around him. Millennia later, an identical monolith comes to light in the lunar crater of Tycho, during excavation that men are conducting on the moon. To find out who the signal that the incomprehensible object has suddenly emitted in the direction of Jupiter is intended for, the spacecraft Discovery set off, carrying astronauts David Bowman and Frank Paul, as well as three scientists. But when, after an 18-month travel, the spaceship reached the planet, only Bowman survived the attack by HAL 9000, the supercomputer entrusted with all control of the ship, which failed and tried to eliminate the entire crew. But after having deactivated the killer computer, Bowman is left alone to face the universe and the unknowable presence that awaits him on the giant planet. Kubrick's film represents an epoch-making turning point for science fiction cinema, and perhaps not only for it. Never before man had been so explicitly recognized as the true protagonist and placed at the center, at the same time subject and object of a philosophical search for the meaning of life. Arthur Clarke's 2001 A Space Odyssey is now the novel from which Kubrick's film was made. The novel was conceived together with Stanley Kubrick. He had contacted the famous science fiction writer to make a film from one of his short stories, but ended up proposing to write a novel together. Those film and novel were released together, the book by Clarke and the film by Kubrick, even though both had agreed on the main narrative passages for one and the other. Novel and film so lend themselves to completely different interpretation, but it's precisely the analysis of what Kubrick did not transpose into film that helps to interpret the film correctly. The novel is short, simple, and explicit. The film is yet long, complex, and cryptic. Let us start with the first part, The Dawn of Man. In the novel, what happens is very simple. Aliens, so evolved that they have probably even lost their physical forms, about 3 million years ago put monoliths around the universe in order to accelerate the evolution of living forms. Meanwhile, a group of apes struggle for survival, until one day they find a monolith, an object somewhere between a supercomputer and an higher consciousness, with the ability to influence the minds of others. In the book, the monolith is transparent, but emits light and can visualize whatever it wants, and show the apes the beginning of the road to evolution. In the film, on the other hand, the monolith is black and impenetrable. Negligible difference, you may think? Not at all, it's decisive. The stone is no longer a kind of machine for boosting underdeveloped brain, but becomes a symbol. There is no mechanical relationship between its action and the monkey's learning. They merely touch it and possess it. It is evident that in the transposition between the language of writing and the language of film, Kubrick has made full use of the synthesis power of the latter. The monolith, in fact, becomes the means of communicating a passage, which in historical reality has lasted millennia, between the animalistic state and the first glimmer of human consciousness. So the monolith represents knowledge, the gradual accumulation of which transforms the ape into man. But the ape does not take advantage of the trigger to improve the condition of his own species. On the contrary, he starts to use it in the negative way against his fellows. In the book, the part ends with a lunar sunrise as the monolith found on the moon transmits a signal to Venus. According to the book, aliens buried a monolith on the moon, the discovery of which would signal that humans had evolved to a point where they could travel in space. This is no way inferred from the film, and this is not by chance. Since Kubrick elevates the monolith to a symbol, he cannot really turn it to some kind of dilated alien transmitter. He therefore arranges the visualization of the scene in such a way as to suggest a completely different meaning. In fact, Dr. Floyd touches the monolith with exactly the same timidity and lack of consciousness as the ape 4 million years earlier. The third part is the journey of the five astronauts to Jupiter, Venus in the book. Hal in the book is not precisely electronic, but he has some organic parts. It has an internal conflict due to the fact that it was forced to not reveal the true purpose of the mission to the two non-hibernating astronauts, when he used to have a sincere relationship with humans instead. The contradiction creates a sort of short circuit that he cannot manage. In the film, on the other hand, Hal rebels because he cannot admit it is wrong and does not want to be deactivated by the astronaut. It wants to survive even at the cost of human lives. It is the machine that wants to dominate man, a theme of many science fiction films, for example Matrix, Terminator, and so much more. In the book, the surviving Bowman struggles to regain contact with Earth, from which he is ordered to continue the expedition. He is not very enthusiastic about it, but he has no choice. When he is near to a moon of Saturn, Japetus, he spots a monolith similar to the other, but of gigantic dimension. According to the book, the alien who built it had received the radio signal from the monolith on the moon. So Bowman decides to land with his capsule on the roof of the giant monolith, but it opens up and swallows him. So inside it, he falls and crosses interstellar space. It is a kind of Stargate according to the author. He sees many other alien constructions until he arrives at a kind of strange alien hotel. To make him happy, the aliens have prepared him a room similar to a typical US hotel. But this in the film is completely different. There is no signal at all of alien presence. Everything is taken to a symbolic level. So Bowman begins a kind of journey that is not triggered by anything, but simply processed by images of the rotation of a monolith in the space. As if this, let us remember, symbol of knowledge, invites the man to follow him on a new journey. In the long sequence of psychedelic images in the film, there are no alien presence or artifact at all, but only the continuous change of landscape and colors. And here we come to the last sequence. In the film, Bowman finds himself inside an 18th century flat, but be aware, the furniture is 18th century, but the light comes from the floor, so this environment is both past and future at the same time. The setting and the cross-references between ages clearly indicate that the character is now in an environment where past, present and future are mixed together. For this reason, it's no longer a question of time or progress, but a different road to travel, of another possibility to explore a new beginning. The distance of the novel from the films show how erroneous it is to deduce the meaning of the films from the novel from which they were taken. As it turns out, Kubrick himself collaborated on the novel, but when he found out himself having to translate the language of the script into language of film, he went from a kind of sci-fi realism to a filmed philosophical essay. So if you like this video, I suggest you to visit my blog on my website, check subtitle for other content like this, refer to translation and films.